Percy Bysshe Shelley is arguably the finest lyric poet of the English language, competing for that position with none other than William Shakespeare. You must remember that I'm now speaking as a die-hard fan, as a hardcore admirer of Percy Bysshe Shelley, because I'm teaching Ozymandias. He made a rich contribution to English literature. His poems, his famous poems include Ozymandias, the West Wind Ode, To a Skylark, the Pastoral Elegy Adonais, the long poems including The Triumph of Life, the political ballad, The Mask of Anarchy, verse plays including the Sensi. I think the Italian pronunciation is the Cenci, and Prometheus Unbound. The philosophical essay, The Necessity of Atheism. Prose fiction, non-fictional prose. In fact, Shelley was a prolific literary artist, creating a substantial corpus before his untimely death at the age of 29. Ozymandias is a very well-known and widely prescribed poem of P.B. Shelley. Almost every schoolboy, not just in the UK, but in the entire Anglo-Saxon world, has studied it. My father studied it. I studied it. And now my son is studying it. Ozymandias is the Greek name for the Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II, who is sometimes referred to as Ramesses the Great. He was a very powerful and an extremely successful pharaoh who won more than a dozen military campaigns and left behind numerous constructions. The immediate inspiration for the writing of the poem Ozymandias was the arrival in England, in Britain, of the statue fragment called the Younger Memnon. I think I have to correct myself because the statue fragment arrived in Britain only in 1821 and Shelley started writing the poem in 1817. So the immediate inspiration for writing the poem was the anticipation of the arrival of the statue fragment called the Younger Memnon. The Younger Memnon is a head and torso fragment, of the statue of Ramesses II, looked upon as one of the greatest pharaohs of ancient Egypt. There was much excitement and fanfare in connection with the expected arrival of the statue fragment, and it set the imagination of Shelley afire. There is no doubt that the Ozymandias so occupies centrality in the thematic structure of this poem is very much the Ozymandias of history. Ramesses II, Ramesses the Great, one of the all-time greats among the pharaohs of Egypt. History tells us that Ramesses II was a mighty commander, victorious in all the campaigns that he set out on, except one which ended in stalemate. History also tells us that he had a passion for construction, that he had a mania for immortalizing himself through construction, through statue, through sculpture. Thus, the Ozymandias in this poem is an accurate reflection of the Ozymandias, the historical figure, of the Ozymandias in history, of Ozymandias, the historical figure. At the same time, it has to be pointed out that the Ozymandias in this poem is much more than a mere person, a mere pharaoh, a mere commander, a mere construction maniac. He is a metaphor for the urge in the hearts of the rich, the powerful, the mighty, the urge to immortalize themselves through construction, through sculpture, through statue, completely ignorant of the futility of all these immortalizing exercises. What is the meaning of the word Ozymandias? Before I discuss the meaning, I would like to observe that there is a strong element of onomatopoeia in the word. The sound of the word Ozymandias, Ozymandias, makes one think of a mighty king, a monarch who wields great power. Ozymandias can never be the name of a dog catcher. Having said that, I would like to point out that there is no such word as Ozymandias in the Greek language. And so the word Ozymandias has no meaning. Ozymandias is not a word in the Greek language, is not a name in the Greek language. Rather, it is a Greek rendering of the throne name of Ramesses II, one of the greatest pharaohs of ancient Egypt. But is there more to it than meets the eye? Is this poem really about Ramesses II? About Ozymandias? Perhaps Shelley was not thinking of Ozymandias alone while writing this poem. He had King George III very much in mind, probably. And Ozymandias becomes an allegory for King George III. So this poem is simultaneously about Ramesses II, the mighty pharaoh of ancient Egypt, and King George III, the mad tyrant of England. I met a traveller from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown I shall stop here." I met a traveller from an antique land. The very opening line of the poem, in fact, the very opening word of the poem displays the touch of the master. I met a traveller. That is the opening word. What is the subject matter of the poem? A statue, a broken statue. Whose statue is it? The statue of the Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses II, whose regnal name, the Greek version of whose regnal name is Ozymandias. When did Ramesses II live? The general consensus is that He lived between BC 1303 and BC 1213. You must remember, this is the time in which Ramesses II is supposed to have lived. Thus, the subject matter of the poem is very remote as far as the English reader is concerned. Temporally remote because Ramesses II, Pharaoh Ramesses II, lived between BC 1303 and BC 1213. Geographically distant because the locus of the thematics of the poem is the deserts of Egypt. But what does the poet do? He starts the poem with the word I. He thus provides a solipsistic touch to the opening of the poem. I met a traveler from an antique land. Thus, Shelley collapses the distance, temporal distance and geographical distance, between subject matter and reader, and provides an immediacy, an experience of immediacy to the reader. I met a traveler from an antique land. Beginning the poem with the word I is, as I have already pointed out, nothing short of a stroke of genius. The poet presents the reader with a very immediate experience. Though the subject matter of the poem is what happened far away and long ago, the narrator shares with the reader his personal knowledge. I met a traveler, a person who had traveled from an antique land, ancient land. You must remember that Egypt was host to one of the most ancient civilizations in human history. Who said, two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Two, two vast, two huge legs of stone, legs sculpted in stone, trunkless legs. Trunk means body. The body apart from the head and the limbs. Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert, in the middle of the Egyptian desert. Two vast stone legs, two huge legs sculpted in stone stand, and their trunkless legs. Near them, in the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, a broken face lies half sunk in the sand near them. Obviously, what we are seeing here are the ruins of a great statue, a colossal statue. I would like to pause for a moment and discuss Ozymandias. Not this Ozymandias, but the Ozymandias of Horace Smith. Horace Smith, the poet, novelist, stockbroker, wrote a sonnet titled Ozymandias in friendly competition with Percy, Bysshe, Shelley. And it was published almost at the same time as Shelley's poem. We don't have the time to discuss the Ozymandias of Horace Smith in detail, but my personal assessment is that the Horace Smith poem is lacking in punch when compared to Shelley's poem. Half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read. Near them, on the sand, half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown, a broken face, lies near the legs, the trunkless legs. It's a broken face, it's a shattered visage. It is not lying on the sand exactly. It is half sunk in sand. It's partially covered by the desert sand. I would like to make two observations here. The first is about the subject of the statue, Ozymandias the Great, Pharaoh Rameses II, man commanding absolute power, unquestioned and unquestionable power. And the fact that he commanded absolute power is visible in his body language. And what is it? Whose frown? His forehead is furrowed. There are lines on his forehead. He is impatient with the wretched creatures of the world. And wrinkled lip, lip which is curled, lip which is folded, and sneer of cold command. Sneer is a mocking expression, a mocking smile. The man has absolute power. He is aware of it. And he has only contempt for the rest of the world, the wretched creatures who populate this world. Cold command, absolute power which is totally divorced from emotion. Cold hearted tyrant. I am reminded here of a line which is attributed, perhaps wrongly, to Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria used to say, "We are not amused." That was her stock remark, stock response. This has been denied. The members of the royal family have denied it. Her own granddaughters have denied it. Perhaps it is apocryphal. But there is a general belief that this was the stock remark, stock response of Queen Victoria. We are not amused. The Queen used in private conversation the royal we, the majestic plural. Whether this is right or wrong, true or false, I'm just trying to establish a parallel between Queen Victoria, who was more of a constitutional monarch, and Ozymandias the Great, who was an absolute ruler. I think I said I have to make two observations. I've already made one regarding the subject of the artwork. Ozymandias the Great, the absolute ruler, the cruel tyrant. The second is regarding the artist, the sculptor. Tell that its sculptor well those passions red, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The narrator says that it appears that the artist was an extremely gifted one. The sculptor was extremely gifted. He was able to well those passions read. He was able to read those passions, understand those passions, comprehend those passions effectively, and translate them perfectly onto stone. And even now you can see them. The emotions of the king, the thoughts of the king, the arrogance of the king, the cruelty of the king, the tyranny of the king, they are visible even now on the lifeless stone. The sculptor was able to create a shocking verisimilitude, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. It is true that The material out of which the artwork is created, the sculpture is created, is stone. It is lifeless. But even now, from those lifeless things, we can understand what exactly were the passions of Ozymandias the Great, the emotions of Ozymandias the Great. So, my two observations are one, Ozymandias the Great, the absolute ruler, the cruel tyrant, the victorious Pharaoh. Two, the gifted artist, reproducing with absolute perfection the passions that drove the Pharaoh, the emotions that controlled the Pharaoh. Two lines from P.B. Shelley's poem, almost equally famous poem, almost as equally famous as Ozymandias. England in 1819. Demand quotation here. I quote, rulers who neither see nor feel nor know, but leech like to their fainting country cling. Unquote. Obviously, Ozymandias falls in this category of rulers. We now come to line number 8, which I think is the most complex line in the entire poem. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. When I read the poem for the first time as a schoolboy, I was unable to explain it convincingly to myself. I don't know whether I can do it any better now, after 30 years of teaching Ozymandias. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. The 8th line of the poem, the most complex line of the poem. Most commentators, most critics, most teachers simply gloss over this line. Let us try to take a long, hard look at line number 8. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. Perhaps the best explanation is that the hand and the heart belong to the subject of the sculpture, to the Pharaoh, to Ozymandias. The hand that mocked them. Ozymandias was a cruel tyrant, was an arrogant autocrat, and he had nothing but contempt for his subjects, and so he mocked his subjects. The hand that mocked them, the hand here as a synecdoche, as a metonymy, stands for his power as a ruler. And he used his power as a ruler to mock his subjects because he had nothing but contempt for them. He was an all powerful autocrat. And the heart that fed. At the same time, his subjects were dependent on him for their daily survival. Had he wanted, he could have starved them to death, but he did not do that. His heart did not allow him to do that. So his heart fed his subjects. Perhaps not because he loved his subjects, but because if all his subjects die of starvation, if all his subjects died of starvation, he would cease to be the Pharaoh, he would cease to be the ruler. So the primary explanation is that the hand and the heart belong to Ozymandias the Great. The secondary explanation is that the hand and the heart belong to the sculptor, the hand that mocked them. The hand of the sculptor. The sculptor was one of the subjects of the Pharaoh. Just as the Pharaoh had contempt for his subjects, his subjects too had contempt for him, though they might behave in a very servile manner, in a very humble manner before him. The hand that mocked them, the hand of the sculptor mocked the pharaoh. How? By creating a perfect replica of the pharaoh in real life, by revealing the pharaoh for what he was, and by facilitating the ridicule of the pharaoh by the world, by allowing the world to understand who the pharaoh really was. The hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed, the heart of the sculptor fed the sculpture. How did the masterpiece come into being? Because the sculptor poured his heart into it, the heart that fed. The sculptor, the artist, fed his creation, fed his artwork with all his stamina, energy, emotion, creativity, and as a result, the masterpiece came to be created. So we have two differing readings of the line. The primary reading being that the hand and the heart belong to the pharaoh, and the secondary reading being that the hand and the heart belong to the sculptor. I hope I have made sense of the line, however difficult it be. I think even a third reading is possible. We can say that the hand belongs to the sculptor, to the artist, while the heart belongs to the pharaoh, to Ozymandias. The hand that mocked, the hand that mocked, the sculptor, the artist mocks the pharaoh by creating, through his art, an exact replica of the pharaoh. The sculptor has nothing but contempt for Ozymandias. And it is through his contempt that he creates his work of art. His work of art is an expression of his contempt. There is no doubt that there is not much love lost between Ozymandias and the sculptor. But it is Ozymandias who is feeding the sculptor. The sculptor receives remuneration from the pharaoh and feeds himself and perhaps also his family with that remuneration. So, on the one hand, we have the hand of the artist which mocks the pharaoh, and on the other hand, you have the heart of the pharaoh which is responsible for feeding the artist. Please take a look at the punctuation that closes the line. It's a semicolon. The heart that fed, semicolon, which means that there's a strong pause after that line. A strong pause is positioned after fed. Again, it means that this line, the eighth line, line number 8, attaches itself to the preceding lines and not to the succeeding lines. Because the succeeding lines deal with a totally different facet of the thematic structure of the poem. And on the pedestal, these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty in despair. And on the pedestal, pedestal is the base on which the statue is mounted, the structure which supports the statue. These words appear, these words are inscribed on the base of the statue, on the pedestal of the statue. And these words are, in my opinion, some of the most powerful lines ever written by Percy Bysshe Shelley. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty and despair. This is arguably the finest example of situational irony in all English poetry. Some of you may feel that I am going overboard, but I think I should go overboard. And this is my considered opinion, at least when I teach Ozymandias. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. I'm not just a king. I'm King of Kings. I'm an emperor who, who has subjugated kings, to whom kings pay homage. I am King of Kings. Look on my works. Look on this statue. Look on what I have achieved. Look on my works. Ye mighty, you mighty of the future and despair. The idea is that the mighty of the future, the rulers of the future, the emperors of the future will look upon the statue, and there will be awe in their hearts, fear in their hearts, apprehension in their hearts, and they will be overwhelmed with despair because they are certain that they are unable to match the power and the glory of Ozymandias, King of Kings. But the fact is that despair is indeed generated in the hearts of the rulers of the future, the greats of the future, the powerful of the future, but in a very different way. The kings, the emperors, the rulers, they look at the statue and despair, not at the power commanded by Ozymandias, but at the futility of power, at the nullity of power, at the fact that at the end of the day, power and glory mean nothing on this earth. Let us spend some time on the term King of Kings. King of Kings is a king, but not just a king. He's a king who is looked upon as a king by other kings. He's a sovereign to whom other kings pay homage. He's an emperor. King of Kings was a very common title taken by emperors in the past. For example, you have Darius the First or Darius the Great, King of Kings of the First Persian Empire. In India, you have Chandragupta the First, who took the title Maharaja Adhiraja, literally King of Kings. But I think that there is more to it than meets the eye. Of course, Shelley is having the emperors in mind when he writes King of Kings. But perhaps he is also having Jesus Christ in mind. For in the Bible, Jesus Christ is repeatedly referred to as King of Kings. 1 Timothy 6:15, Revelation 17:14, Revelation 19:16. Jesus Christ is repeatedly called Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And perhaps the poet wants to hint that even the power of Jesus Christ, Son of God, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, is in the long run futile, in the long run subject to decay and destruction. Please don't tell me that I'm overreading. Please remember that throughout his life, Percy Bysshe was a self-proclaimed atheist, and that while at Oxford, while still a student at Oxford, Percy Bysshe wrote the pamphlet The Necessity of Atheism along with his friend Thomas Hogg. Please also remember that Percy Bysshe created some very powerful anti-Christian works such as Coin Mab, and that he reveled in the identity of an infidel. We now come to the very last part of the poem. Nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. Nothing beside remains. The statue is broken. The statue is disintegrated. And by the side of the disintegrated statue, nothing remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, what do you find around the disintegrated statue, the broken statue? Round the decay of that colossal wreck. It was a huge statue, and that huge statue is now broken. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, infinite and bare, no buildings, no structures, no trees, no vegetation, no human beings, no animals, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands, the desert, no ups and downs, a level desert made of sands, the lone and level sands. You feel very lonely there. You don't find anyone except yourself there. The lone and level sands stretch far away. As far as the eye can see, you see nothing but a desert. Around the broken statue, the broken colossal statue, the wrecked colossal statue. Thus, the victory of time over human effort, the victory of nature over man, the victory of posterity over human hubris is complete and unequivocal. Ozymandias deals with multiple themes: the hubris of the powerful, the desire for immortality in absolute rulers, the limitations of human power, human ignorance of things to come, human ignorance of the future, the victory of time over human effort, the victory of nature over man, the victory of posterity over human desires, the immortality of art. After all is said and done, Ozymandias is now remembered not for his being king of kings, not for his ruling an empire, but for the work of art which survives, though in a broken form. And Ozymandias is remembered because he has been immortalized in the present poem by P.B. Shelley. The poem also throws light on ancient Egyptian civilization and its obsession with huge statues and huge structures as an attempt to overcome mortality and oblivion. Above all, the poem deals with the callousness of rulers, their absolute lack of concern for their subjects, the cruelty of their tyranny. Ozymandias is one of the 10 most famous sonnets in the English language. It consists of 14 lines. Is it an Italian sonnet or an English sonnet? It's difficult to say. Ozymandias blends the features of Italian and English sonnets, and this is a tribute to the originality of Percy, Bysshe Shelley. The rhyme scheme of the sonnet is innovative. A, B, A, B, A, C, D, C, E, D, E, F, E, F. I hope I'm right. The meter is iambic pentameter. Pentameter means every line comprises 5 feet and each foot consists of 2 syllables. So there are 10 syllables in every line. And every line consists of 5 feet alternating between Unstressed and stressed syllables. I am marches short to long. Unstressed and stressed syllables. The poem avoids the final couplet, which is typical of the English sonnet. The poet adopts a rather experimental approach to the poem, to the technical aspects of the poem. There is a gradual erosion of rhyme in the poem, and some critics point out that this gradual erosion of rhyme in the poem reflects its most important theme: the erosion of power, the erosion of empires, the erosion of structures created in order to attain immortality. Irony is saying something and meaning something else, meaning something dramatically different. We have already said that this poem contains the finest example of situational irony in all English poetry. Let me try to remember the exact lines. My name is Ozymandias, King of kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. My name is Ozymandias, King of kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Ozymandias thinks that the mighty of the future will look upon his monument and be filled with despair, sure that they will be unable to match the achievement of Ozymandias, King of Kings. But the fact is that the mighty of the future will look upon this broken statue, this devastated monument, and be filled with despair because of the realization that their own efforts to immortalize themselves through such colossal structures are also doomed inevitably to failure. Apostrophe is where the speaker turns to address somebody or something, and the somebody is usually not present there. The somebody could be dead, the something could be inanimate. This is precisely what happens in the writing in the pedestal. Look on my works, ye mighty in despair. The mighty of the future are not present here, but they are directly addressed. So this is a good example of apostrophe. Alliteration is the figure of speech in which consonant sounds are repeated in close succession. We have several examples of alliteration in the present poem, such as cold command, boundless and bare, lone and level sands. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds in succession. There are several examples of assonance in the present poem. For example, the O sound. The O sound is found in colossal wreck, and also in Ozymandias. The long A sound is found in land, sand, and antique. The short A sound is found repeatedly in words like half sunk, a shattered visage lies, and in words like traveller, words like tank. Synecdoche is the figure of speech in which the part stands for the whole or the whole stands for the part. We have two beautiful examples of synecdoche in the present poem: the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. To whom do these things belong? We have already discussed. To whom does the hand belong? To whom does the heart belong? Here, we need not be concerned about that. The hand and the heart stand for the whole individual. The hand stands for a person. The heart stands for a person. So the hand and the heart are parts which stand for the whole person. Personification is the figure of speech in which human traits are attributed to non human objects. The non human things are made human through attribution of human traits. We have some excellent examples of personification in Ozymandias. The statue is described with graphic detail, sneer of cold command, wrinkled lip, and as a result, the statue is in a way personified. The statue is made human, and the statue stands as a powerful presence in front of the reader. The inscription is also personified in a way. The inscription speaks to the mighty of the future, very much like a human being. The inscription issues a direction to the mighty of the future, a command to the mighty of the future to look on the works of Ozymandias and to despair. Caesura is a pause near the middle of a line. Usually the line is free flowing. The typical line in English poetry is free flowing from the beginning of the line to the end of the line. But sometimes the poet deliberately breaks the line somewhere near the middle, introduces a strategic pause, compelling the reader to stop while reading the line. This is called caesura. Shelley makes several very appropriate uses of caesura in Ozymandias. We shall take a look at some of them. Look at the second line. Who said, two vast and trunkless legs of stone? There is a pause after who said, and a dash is given there. Caesura is usually marked by a semicolon or a full stop or a dash. Look at the next line, the third line. Stand in the desert. Pause near them on the sand. Here the caesura is marked by three dots. Let us go a little further down. Which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. Which yet survive, comma, stamped on these lifeless things. Look at the next line. The hand that mocked them, pause, and the heart that fed. Here the pause, the caesura is marked by, symbolized by a comma. Look at the 12th line. Nothing beside remains. Stop, round the decay. A very powerful caesura. Nothing beside remains. Stop, round the decay. Enjambment is the opposite of caesura. Here, a line overflows its boundaries and spills into the next line. There's a movement which shatters the line ending and flows into the next line. We have several excellent examples of enjambment in Ozymandias. Look at lines 2 and 3. Legs of stone stand in the desert. There is no pause after stone. Legs of stone stand in the desert. Look at lines 6 and 7. I'm not sure whether it is 6 and 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right. Well, those passions red, which yet survive. Well, those passions red, no pause after red, which yet survive. Look at the third last line and the penultimate line. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, no pause after decay. The third last line overflows its boundaries to spill into the penultimate line. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, we have sculpture images in the poem, desert images in the poem, even inscription images in the poem. The images are sharply etched and striking. Thus, the imagery, sculpture imagery, the desert imagery, the inscription imagery results in a strong fabric of images in the poem. A metaphor is a figure of speech in which a comparison is suggested rather than stated. A metaphor is an implicit simile. A simile is an explicit metaphor. We have some very fine metaphors in this poem. First of all, the statue. The statue itself is a metaphor. The statue stands for the king, for Ozymandias, signifying, symbolizing the absolute power of the king, which at the end of the day turns out to be powerlessness. Thus, the statue can be seen as a metaphor for the king, not merely for Ozymandias, but for all kings, for all holders of power, for human power itself. The inscription at the base of the statue can be seen as a metaphor for the human longing for immortality, for human arrogance, for the desire of the humans, for the desire of the humans to shape the future after they have left this world. The entire poem can be read, and it has been read by some critics. The entire poem can be read as a metaphor for the futility of human ambition, for the powerlessness of human power, for the folly of human desires. The desert is a metaphor for nature itself, for time itself. The desert is infinite, like time. The desert is part of nature, it stands for nature itself, and the poet makes it clear that over a long period of time, nature triumphs over man. Time triumphs over man. A symbol is something which stands for something else. Put very simply, Ozymandias is rich in symbolism. Of course, the central symbol in the poem is a statue of Ozymandias. While standing tall, it symbolizes the power and the glory of Ozymandias, King of Kings, Pharaoh Rameses II, one of the greatest pharaohs of Egypt. But when it crumbles, it symbolizes the limitations of the power of Ozymandias. It symbolizes the limitations of the power of autocratic rulers. And finally, it symbolizes the power, the limitations of the power of the human race. The inscription can also be seen as a symbol. While the statue was standing tall, the inscription directed the mighty of the future to look at the statue and despair. When the statue crumbled, the inscription did the same thing, but it became the symbol for something dramatically different. Because the despair that would be filled in the hearts of the mighty of the future would be a very different kind of despair. Despair not out of their inability to match the achievements of Ozymandias, but despair or the realization that their own efforts to attain immortality through such structures are inevitably doomed to failure. Finally, the desert can be seen as a symbol for time, for nature, for eternity. And the fact that the desert landscape was able to overwhelm the statue of Ozymandias symbolizes the victory of nature, time, eternity over arrogant human effort. I would like to bring Ozymandias of Percy by Shelley into conjunction with Sonnet 55 of William Shakespeare, especially the opening lines of Sonnet 55. I quote, "Not marble, nor the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme." Unquote. Ozymandias, King of Kings, is dead and gone. His statue has crumbled. The anonymous sculptor is forgotten. The anonymous sculptor of the statue is forgotten. But Ozymandias, the poem, is eternal. And I would like to add its author, its creator, Percy Bysshe Shelley, is immortal. I think I've been speaking for quite some time now. I've said everything that came to my mind. I hope I have not left out anything important. I don't think that I have left out anything important. I would like to wrap up the discussion by pointing out that there are quite a few poems in English in which one of the fundamental themes of Ozymandias, the passing of time, the passage of time, is dealt with, such as Sonnet 55 of Shakespeare, which I have already quoted from the Autumn Ode of John Keats, A Wife in London of Thomas Hardy, Afternoons of Philip Larkin, and Death of a Naturalist of Seamus Heaney.